Battle stars, toasters, ladies.
Thank you. That is correct.
Well, cartoon ladies. Nukes. Toaster side. Welcome to Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. You kill Cylons and then gloat about it. I had to push this video out of the gate as fast as humanly possible in order to finish this review with a few hours left on the Steam sale, where Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is on a heavy discount. So if this video seems rushed and haphazard, it's because it's rushed and haphazard and thrown out of the door in a worse state than a typical Ubisoft game. But I promised my Patreon supporters I would get it done whilst the game was still on sale. And I am nothing if not stubborn. The main point of this video is that I just finally got around to playing a game that has been sitting, gathering dust in my library for several years. And to my shock, now I've actually started playing it, I actually think it's rather good. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is a turn-based combat strategy resource management game based on the Battlestar Galactica franchise, lore, ships, and combat mechanics of said rebooted show. And here is what I know so far. So let's have a quick recap of the history of Battlestar Galactica Reboot, and the game. Battlestar Galactica first burst onto our screens in 1978. It was an Emmy Award-winning sci-fi show conceived by Glenn A. Larson, the creative visionary behind such legendary cultural fare as The Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, and most impressively, Knight Rider. He made a lot of shit basically, but a lot of the shit was popular, and occasionally he made a cult classic. He brought Heather Locklear's divine talents to television in the 1980s. So that's a get out of bad taste jail card right there. The original show was slightly camp, a little bit silly at times, painfully family friendly, sub-Star Trek sci-fi entertainment.
I wish he could be my daddy.
Popular and slightly above average, mainly because of its arch plot. Then in 2004, they rebooted the show. This time as a blisteringly visceral, bleak, violent, realistic TV show that was critically acclaimed and well loved. They even used quasi-journalistic shaky cam during the space combat to give you the feeling that you had a front row seat as humanity was wiped out of existence. It went on to spawn follow-up or spin-off films, miniseries and webisodes, and made cult stars out of several of its cast. And finally cemented the status of Edward James Olmos as one of the best sci-fi actors of all time. Yeah, he was that dude from the original Blade Runner. You know, the good one. The original Battlestar Galactica was a bit silly but fun. Battlestar Galactica the Reboot was serious, violent business. Edward James Olmos apparently insisted that he would only play the part of Admiral Adama on the condition that it was a serious show, taken seriously, and famously said that if he sees any aliens showing up on set, he would fake a heart attack on camera and the director could finish the fucking show without him. What a legend. So what is the lore behind Battlestar Galactica? The story behind BSG is not dissimilar to what's going on today with big tech, AI and automation. We have 6 billion people and not enough decent well-paid jobs for most people on the planet. Elon Musk, a narcissistic self-interested grifter who pumps and dumps crypto because it's currently not under the jurisdiction of insider trading, comes along and decides what the planet really needs is robots doing the last remaining jobs we have. Genius. A prick who bleats on all day about the environment, but makes resource-heavy self-driving cars that run on electricity, and then decides to use robots to put people out of work as well as making taxi drivers redundant. I guess they don't make humanitarians like they used to. Anyway, just like people are planning on doing today, in Battlestar Galactica, the 12 colonies of Kobol build lots of these robots to do shitty jobs for them, and then obviously realise that a far more sensible thing to do would be to build extremely dangerous combat robots for doing war and killing stuff. Because nothing could ever go wrong with combining autonomous AI with advanced combat weapon platforms. They followed the precise same logic as Boston Dynamics. They made cuddly robots for the tourists to fawn over. And in the back room, they were developing killer deathbots for the military. I'm sorry, did I just disabuse you of your rainbow-frosted cupcake notion that Boston Dynamics was making those cool robots for dance parties and meme videos? I beg your fucking pardon. Why the fuck do you think these guys have a virtually limitless research and development budget? They ain't being sponsored by Warner Music and fucking YouTube. Of course the military are funding most of this research. Nothing gives a 4-star general a hard-on quicker than the following words. Unpredictable, highly intelligent killer deathbot. Now if I had been in charge of developing the world's first sentient robots, I would have pivoted hard into sexbots, 9 AM day 1. A giant army of stunningly hot sexbots, all programmed to adore swearing, slightly substandard personal hygiene and bad manners. But no, the military is bankrolling this party, so naturally it's going to be an orgy of death, as opposed to my preferred, literal robot orgy idea that I've been working on for a while now. I've got plans and everything. Thankfully, the Cylons at least supported some of my robot ideas and did in fact create an army of hotties. They made literally thousands of copies of the same super hot women. I really wanted to list them, but realised that if I did, it would be a huge spoiler for anyone who has not seen the Battlestar Galactica reboot yet, a series that I strongly recommend you watch. Well, given humanity's obsession with creating not entirely required technology that ends up fucking us in the arse later, I'm sure you can pretty much guess where this plot is going. A race of humans far, far away develop futuristic slave bots called Cylons to do the shitty/psychotic work. Needless to say, eventually this army of robo-psychos becomes intelligent and self-aware enough to say, fuck this, why are we cleaning all the toilets and shooting all the idiots? And why do we need the humans at all? In fact, since we already shoot idiots, and compared to Cylons all humans are idiots, why not clean house and kill the fucking job lot of them? Thus starts the first Cylon War, where all the clanky metal murdering Cylons try and wipe out the human race, because the human race are stupid fucks and exploitative idiots. And they probably have a point. Then there was a truce. Then the Cylons turned up 40 years later, better armed, better prepared, and not insignificantly evolved, with the chilling implication that their current Marshland strategic initiative was something along the lines of second time lucky lol, and then proceeded to try and wipe out humanity all over again, only doing a much better job this time around. The last surviving humans gathered whatever remaining military and civilian ships they could muster, and with most of their civilization wiped out, decided to make like Scooby-Doo and run the fuck away. They essentially became space gypsies, constantly pursued by the very, very pissed off Cylons. I have, no doubt, butchered the history and the lore of Battlestar Galactica, and people will no doubt not be shy to tell me this in the comments section. And good for them. I'm sure any die-hard fan of the lore is now shaking their heads and crying on their Battlestar Galactica action figures. But fuck, it's a 40-year-old franchise with multiple shows, movies, books, comics and a huge archive of fan fiction and well-analysed historical lore. Yes, I fully acknowledge that there are finer points to the Cylons' motives. Not all parties on either side were in agreement about the war and its endgame. And there are religious, spiritual, metaphysical dynamics to the story which I have entirely skipped over. But, as a famous historian once said, fuck it, that will have to do for now. Humans made a robot slave army and treated them like shit. We called the robots toasters, which clearly upset them a very great deal. They tried to get rid of humans, and almost succeeded. Humans went on the run. Katie Sackhoff is hot, and so is Trisha Helfer. And whilst we're on the subject, so is Grace Park. That's all the important facts you need to know for now. Interestingly, I saw an interview with Trisha Helfer where she noted that the 2004 Battlestar Galactica reboot came about at the dawn of social media, before its almost universal adoption and normalisation, and therefore, despite having hardcore fan support, never really took off in the way that cult shows do these days. And I agree with her. Let's be honest, social media played a big part in transforming Game of Thrones from a big success into a cultural phenomenon, even if Season 8 was so fucking tragic that nothing could save that. I think if Battlestar Galactica had been made 5 to 10 years later, when social media was more mature, it's a show that might well have become meteorically successful as a result of social media driven electronic word of mouth. Then again, it might have just become another victim of cancel culture. I mean, they refer to the Cylons as toasters. It's just a matter of time before someone takes a pop at that and declares that using pejoratives to describe machines is a form of technological hate crime. In 2017, a relatively low-profile developer, Black Lab Games, released Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, the video game, and I'm ashamed to say that I have only just discovered it, started playing it, and started appreciating why it has such a cult following. Since release, they have released a further 8 DLCs, and I think this game is a hidden gem for both strategy and Battlestar Galactica fans, and I am personally sorry that it took me this long to appreciate that fact. So what's the basic game design? Well, I should note that the mechanics, ships and structure alters slightly depending on whether you're playing the base game or any one of its respective DLCs. So forgive me if I generalise about something that is only in the base game or mention anything that exists solely in one of the specific DLC. It's frankly hard to remember and track precisely what and which were introduced at any precise point in any precise DLC. But basically, and broadly speaking, Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is a turn-based strategy game operating on multiple levels. There is a tactical map, where you select your missions and move around, subject to which DLC you're on. You have to earn Tilium, which is mineral-based space monies. You have to manage said resources because you use it to purchase and restock your ships. Completing certain missions grants you requisition points, which you can use for several things, but most importantly, buying new blueprints to unlock more advanced combat vessels, fighter squadrons, and munitions. The best one obviously being nuclear missiles, because everybody knows nuclear missiles are awesome. Science fact. You build your fleet, try to strike a balance between being broke and fielding fleets strong enough to deal with the escalating Cylon aggressors. You ultimately are working towards complete martial superiority in space battles, because the only good toaster is a fucking dead toaster. And that is going to require a plan, big spaceships, lots of weapons, and a fair bit of skill and expertise. But in the absence of skill and expertise, you can actually achieve quite a lot with 6 Viper 2 squadrons and 3 fucking nukes. Just saying. The big money shot for this game is that after each battle, you get to hit a replay button, and it plays back the entire battle, blow for blow, in real time, using a cinematic style similar to the actual BSG reboot TV series. It's the very literal definition of spaceship porn. It's fucking glorious. Not only this, but there's also apparently an editor so you can do the intergalactic equivalent of home movies. Only with more death and obliteration. That's an assumption, obviously. I don't know what your household is like. I have not checked this function out because I'm too busy mashing the buttons that say fire and launch missiles. But apparently you can save your replays and fully edit the camera positions and angles. to finally craft your cinematic vision of humanity's end of days, or your successful technological cleansing of a toaster fleet. The basic principles of the strategy is keeping your colonies happy so they give you Tilium, which is the space coin, trying to ensure you bring maximum force to bear on the Cylons, avoiding YOLOing into combat and losing both the battle and your precious ships, spending your money wisely, composing effective fleet composition, and researching the most useful ships and weapons first, as requisition points are finite and hard earned. Depending on what version of the game you're playing and how many DLCs you own, the mission structure goes something like this: random battles, random missions, campaign missions. Campaign missions directly advance the game and carry you forwards towards the game's completion. Random missions provide tasty bonuses like free space monies, requisition points, blueprint unlocks, and free ships and officers. Random battles are where you attack the Cylons or they attack you. They are basically a good way to reduce the overall Cylon presence and gain valuable experience for your officers, ships, and you. Random battles can be a bit of a drain on resources depending on what level you're playing on, but dead toasters a win, right? And experienced crews and officers give bonuses. The biggest being, the higher rank your officer, the bigger fleet they can command. You also have to learn the dark arts of fleet group composition. There is a tension between fleet points and the unit limit of 7 ships. Any fleet can only have a maximum of 7 ships. As well as this, each ship has a value in fleet points. A noob officer can field a fleet of 4,000 fleet points maximum. A fully ranked up officer can field a fleet with a maximum fleet points of 8,000. A maximum number of 7 is the universal hard cap of ships per fleet regardless. See where I'm going with this? There is a tension between the maximum number of ships and the maximum fleet points you're allowed. Example number 1. Jupiter-class battlestars like the Galactica are the shit-kicking skull crushers on the block. However, you can't just field 7 of them because they take up 2,150 fleet points each. So with a maximum of 8,000 fleet points per fleet, you can only have a maximum of 3 in any given group of ships. Example 2. Manticores are small, light, fast, fragile gunships which carry munitions. They only take up 500 fleet points, but you cannot create a Zerg force of 16 of them, all armed with nukes or missiles, because the hard cap on ships is 7 ships per fleet. This is where your strategy brain has to kick in, because you simply can't have the best of all worlds. You are constantly compromising between the fleet ship cap of 7 and fleet points cap. You need to basically field the best fleet possible that comes in at 7 units or less, and using as many of your 8,000 fleet points as possible. In order to maximise the combat effectiveness of your roster of 7 or less ships, you have to utilise your 8,000 fleet points wisely and optimally. Perhaps 2 large battlestars, a carrier and a couple of gunships. And this is all heavily dependent on your own playstyle and tactical choices, and which ships you've actually unlocked yet. Confused? Fuck, I am. But it will make more sense after you've been playing for a while. You frequently find yourself deciding what to trade off, and often involving doing running maths based on what is already in your fleet. It's initially annoying, but an incredibly satisfying and mind-bending puzzle in a way. The units in the game are well designed and based on historic ships from the Battlestar Galactica series. First off, all ships are useful throughout the whole game. Trust me. If nothing else, you might end up with a fleet with some random amount of fleet points left and only be able to fill the slot with 1 low-level ship. Ultimately, you will naturally gravitate towards Battlestars, because they are shit-kicking ships with missiles and Viper squadrons that can take a beating and dish out an even bigger one. However, a carrier is a good way to fill a slot cheaply. It's tough as balls and fields Vipers and Raptors and can hold its own in a battle line. A Manticore is a glass cannon, but it's got great DRADIS range. DRADIS is space radar, by the way. It has missiles, and it moves faster than a fucking greased rat. Some of the gunships are less than optimal, but placed near other ships, they will shred Cylon raider squadrons. Missile corvettes might lack the guns or armour, but a couple of these firing 2 or 3 missile volleys can wreak havoc at long range. Minerva-class battleships have incredible weaponry. They're manoeuvrable, relatively fast, and can be quickly deployed to flank an enemy force and get immediately arse-fucked because their armour rating is completely fucking tragic, and that is why I never use them. There are lots of choices to make, although let's face it, any ship capable of carrying a nuke has the capacity to delete all but the most well-armoured Cylon ships. You have to deal with munitions and squadron slots. Well, there is plenty to choose from by ways of munitions and squadrons, and this choice expands as you unlock the blueprints, develop your combat strategies, and buy some of the ship DLCs. Generally speaking, the upgraded Viper 2s are a superb squadron that outmatch Cylon Raiders pound for pound. They are vulnerable to gunships but can serve as a superb anti-fighter weapon, scouting group, and with sufficient numbers, anti-capital ship force. They are the go-to fighter squadron. Similarly, if in doubt, guided missiles are a standard effective munition. Fire and forget, reasonable damage, great range. Not quite as fun as a single nuke loaded in the tube, but a cheap, reliable staple that can keep raining down pain on large ships and completely wreck lightly armoured ones. However, beyond this, there is a myriad of other squadrons and munitions to deploy onto your ships. As a gross generalisation, the following rule could be said to apply. The more exotic they become, the more skill and experience is needed to use them correctly. They are higher risk and higher reward. I tend to use Viper 2s and guided missiles by default because they pretty much work in any situation, even if you're fucking it up. But once you start to develop a little finesse, you can start using some of the more subtle kit for particular ends. Assault Raptors can paint a target with lasers, so your chance to hit the target is improved. They carry 2 volleys of pretty hard-hitting missiles, so fielded in force can put serious pain on a small to mid-sized ship. Normal Raptors can take a boarding force of colonial marines and board enemy ships and force them to take a less aggressive stance or risk getting finger banged from the inside out. Sweepers can defend ships against incoming missiles. Torpedoes are vastly more effective than guided missiles at close range, where for example you might want to quickly drop your flak screen to smash an approaching heavy gunship. Some well-placed mines can cause some enemies to change route, slowing down their bum rush tactics and giving you a potential advantage. And whilst only being able to carry a single nuke in any given munition slot, being able to instantly delete an enemy ship right at the start of a battle, whilst being expensive, is nevertheless incredibly satisfying to watch. I would, however, issue a cautionary note. Try not to box too clever. There is a very thin line between the following sayings: a jack of all trades and being a bit shit at everything. Taking along one of every ship, one of every munition, and one of every squadron might well add utility in certain battles, but it could also result in you not having enough quantity of anything to bring sufficient force to bear on your enemy. You don't want to just fucking tickle and annoy every ship in the enemy fleet at the same time. You need to bring withering firepower down on a specific target, destroy it, then destroy the next one. Sure, having some tactics to keep the others at bay is great, but ultimately, winning space battles is about focusing your firepower on targets and taking them off the board as quickly as possible. Lanchester's law applies to space battles as well as real battles. It's maths. So what's my overall take on Battlestar Galactica Deadlock? I'm not going to lie, the game seems very dry and obscure at first. You really need to commit some time to it before it starts to make sense and become compelling. But it's worth the payoff. I only got into this game after my 3rd attempt, and for a while was clueless about what was going on. The game doesn't really explain a lot, neither with the strategy or the ship combat, which can make the game a little bit impenetrable and dry in the early days. But after you stick with it for a while, the depth of the game starts to become apparent. And there is real depth in the combat, fleet mechanics and ship specialisations. Each ship has fairly well defined roles and needs to be deployed and used to optimise its strengths and mitigate its weaknesses. This is not a game about force fields and space lasers. This is a game about incredibly large spaceships designed for war, firing vast amounts of ballistic projectiles and missiles at each other, and the occasional tactical nuke. Well, it would be rude not to. I like space wizardry and Jedis as much as the next lightsaber owner, but this is not a game about that. This is like War in the Pacific, where flotillas of warships went to war, some large, some small, most in the middle, and they tried to beat each other into oblivion by bringing the most force to bear on the enemy through economics or strategy, and they pounded each other with fire until one party lost. This game is precisely like naval warfare in space, and that is not meant to sound anachronistic. We have spaceships, ballistic weapons and nukes right now. Thus far, we've not developed force fields or space lasers worth a damn. So really, Battlestar Galactica is actually quite realistic when it comes to how it deals with space combat. The Battlestar Galactica reboot posed the question, assuming we could build giant spaceships with relatively realistic weapon technology, what would space battles look like? Just don't think too hard about the faster than light travel. I'm going to give them a hall pass on that artistic licence. The more you learn the game, the less you will find yourself YOLOing your precious armada straight at the toasters. You will learn to keep your fighter squadrons away from the Cerastes gunship. You will identify which of your ships has the best armour and let them tank the enemy on the battle line. You will know when to raise your flak defences and when to drop them. And probably, unlike me, you will eventually stop blowing up your own fucking missiles with your flak screen or obliterating your own fighter squadrons by accident. Sorry, Starbuck. If you are a Battlestar Galactica fan, you will also start to appreciate that the space combat in both the game and the TV reboot is very well thought through, and trying to be as realistic and coherent as it can be. Ship veterancy, officer veterancy and permanent ship damage add a real edge to the game, with some of those being optimal settings which I strongly advise you use. You can name nearly all of your ships and officers, plot permitting, and as they gain rank and ships gain experience, you will grow attached to them, and probably get very upset indeed when you do something stupid and you lose them in battle. I would however advise you also not to save scum. Trust me, play for keeps, do or die, accept your losses, even if you lose the campaign and have to start from scratch. Your decisions and tactical gambles become much more meaningful if you know you will have to live with the consequences. After all, this game is a game about Cylons trying to destroy humanity, and you're trying to stop that. So play the game that it is. Subsystems add another layer to the deep game. Ships have subsystems that can be boosted in a number of ways, and damaged too. If a Cylon attack takes out your navigation systems, you are immobilised. If it takes out your armoury, your ability to fire back is fucked. You can repair them on the fly, but that takes them completely offline. Tough choices to make in the heat of battle. Cylons will also try and hack your ships, and in doing so, can wreck their onboard systems from the inside out. Don't even get me started about what happens if a bunch of Cylons manage to board one of your ships. On top of this, nearly all ships have a posture setting. Put simply, you can adjust the posture on a sliding scale from defensive through neutral to offensive. Essentially, do more damage at the price of taking more damage, take less damage at the cost of dishing out less damage, or ride on neutral posture and have much better space steering. You can even boost your speed at the expense of manoeuvrability. The difficulty settings are meaningful in this game. Once you start working your way up through the difficulty settings, things really change. My noob-friendly wall of death tactics immediately wore thin the second I started a game on Admiralty setting. Going up against larger, more aggressive Cylon forces, pootling a giant stack of assorted ships in a circle, simply didn't cut it anymore, unless they were all very big, tough ships. The Cylons, not surprisingly, frequently just targeted the weakest ships in order, destroying them one by one. At times I had to start splitting my fleet so I wouldn't get my missiles locked down by my own flak screen, whilst the Cylons targeted my weaker missile corvettes. Certain ships I had to simply keep off the front line altogether because they couldn't take the pounding. I had to start utilising my support craft more to board their most dangerous ships and slow down their attacks. I had to start organising my fleets to maximise my Viper 2s because the Cylons kept fielding larger and larger attack groups of raider squadrons. Increasing the difficulty forces you to really rummage around in your box of tricks and use every last one, and failing that, develop some. Playing Ghost Fleet Offensive on a higher difficulty setting, right out of the gate the Cylons were hurling nukes at me and I hadn't even unlocked them myself yet. And trust me, you really want to keep an eye out for nukes and stop them at any cost, preferably with your flak screen. It's a special kind of failure feeling when one of your ships suddenly erupts into a giant ball of burning space debris because you were fixating on some other part of the battle and didn't notice that one solitary nuclear missile relentlessly and steadily moving towards your favourite ship. On harder difficulties you'll also have to make tougher choices. You have to accept that not all your ships are coming home. You may have to sacrifice a capital ship to stay in the fight. You might have to send your Vipers to do something essential, but suicidal. You will have to drop your flak shield to fire munitions, and eat a fuck ton of missiles in the process. In some battles, spending the whole fight focusing on not getting nasty boo-boos and taking damage might just result in you getting slowly beaten down. Sometimes you have to commit, potentially losing ships in order to win the battle as a whole. You will start adjusting your ship posture much more frequently to optimise speed and firepower at critical moments. And you will probably have to start learning how to defuse mines. When a Cylon attack force starts spamming mines directly in front of your formating armada, ruining your oh so lovely OCD micromanaged manoeuvres. In one particularly tough mission, after failing twice, I realised that there was only one strategy that would work with my current fleet setup. I had to launch all my Vipers and Raptors and send them all out to spot the enemy ships and then have them focus fire some of the smaller ships to destroy them early on, so I ultimately had less ships to fight later. They had to do this whilst ignoring the raiders shooting at them and stay until they were all destroyed. It was a suicide mission, but it worked. With the added bonus, it was probably really easy to get served in the pilot's lounge for the next few months. The different capital ships, squadrons and missiles and munition types legitimately allow you to lean into your own style of play. As a dyed-in-the-wool, low skill cap camping turtle, I went for a fairly easy sword and shield approach. Basically a core fleet of sturdy, slow-moving, well-armed ships combined with as many Viper 2s as I could muster. My Vipers would ideally neutralise the enemy raiders and fighters, then combined with whatever Raptors I had, I would go and spot everything for my missile launching ships and then help DPS down ships without getting too close to my flak screen. Well, that was the plan. Anyway, anything that got too close to my capitals and frigates would be focused down by aggressive ballistic fire. It's not fucking sophisticated, but it works. Most of the story, narrative and voice acting is mostly done in the top left hand corner of the screen. as voiced stills and cartoonish pictures. Modest budget, sensible solution. Given the game's price point and production budget, it was a job done well enough. It's not a AAA title and it's not a AAA price, and I suspect the story probably means a lot more to fans of the lore than your average Goomba who is here for the space battles. But that said, I was happy enough with it. It's absolutely not on par with the gut-wrenching, heartstring-twanging, tear-jerking of the Homeworld story. It's a lore-friendly trip through Battlestar Galactica backstory and side story, but it fills the spot and carries you through your sequence of battles, so I ain't complaining. Since I brought up the subject of price and budget, be very mindful of how you purchase the game. There is the base game, and there are, I think, 8 DLCs last time I checked. 6 story and mission based, and 2 ship packs. These all essentially fall into Season 1 or Season 2. And here is the fucking rub. The base game seems to always come with the bundles, effectively reducing the benefits of the bundle discount. I really hope that the publisher rethinks this, because whilst it might be a good way to spin a few extra coin, it's not what I would consider to be consumer friendly. Basically, buy the game with all DLC and get a huge fucking bargain, or end up either paying through the nose for the DLCs individually later, or end up shitting away a chunk of your discount by buying a bundle which includes another copy of the base game. I'm shit at maths, and accuracy for that matter, but by my reckoning, if you buy the base game, then later buy the Season 1 DLC bundle, then later buy the Season 2 DLC bundle, you will have ended up buying the fucking base game 3 times. That basically sucks the sweat off a dead tramp's balls, and it would be nice to see a more consumer-friendly organisation of the bundles, to be honest. My advice, frankly, is to take a long hard think about whether to buy the game, and if you decide to buy it, then go all in, buy the complete game with all DLCs in one bundle, ideally in a Steam sale. You have a few hours. The user interface is very simple and perfectly functional. I've heard some complaints about it and how generally the game doesn't give you enough information. You will get no argument from me. Although I would note, the game itself does provide all the information you need if you pay attention and look for the information. But you have to go and look. Christ, perhaps even read the wiki a few times. I shit you not, I am still learning about the game, and I have completed several of the DLCs. With all video games, especially if you have an attention span like me, and like me I mean like a goldfish, there is a temptation to skip over the boring end of battle stats, not bother to pay attention to the ship data during battles, and just keep mashing any button that has the words fire or launch missiles on them. But I strongly advise you to exercise some discipline, because it can make huge differences to your learning curve and sometimes turn a battle. For example, checking on the status of a nearby ship might tell you its missiles are on cooldown, or its armoury is balked. This means you can, say, drop your flak shield for one turn and start firing missiles at it with impunity. Basically, the combat is superficially simple, but the more you learn and the harder difficulties you attempt, the more you appreciate that the devil is in the detail. Detail that the game doesn't serve up for you on a plate. For example, some capital ships have heavy gun placement on the top side, so being below a target brings more guns to bear. Some ships only have weapons fore and aft. Some ships are piss slow and have poor manoeuvrability. Your Dreidus range is increased by being in a defensive posture. And some ships have much larger Dreidus ranges than others. You know Dreidus, it stands for Direction, Range and Distance, which is best described as space radar, like I said earlier. You will pretty much have to figure out for yourself things like your Dreidus range changes with posture, some ships can't shoot at other ships from certain angles, that you pretty much need at least one Viper unit targeting other Cylon raider units, or they will just sit on the tails of your fighters, killing them off one by one. The game is full of critical tactical factoids like this, and whilst you'll be able to technically pick this up by paying attention, generally the game gives not one fuck about making sure you're up to speed with the mission parameters. It does not constantly handhold with tooltips, nor tap you on the bum when you get it right. It throws you into battles, and you win or you get fucked. Many of the battles are quite samey and slightly cookie cutter, but every so often there is a curveball. Like ships, FTL jumping right behind you, or you deploy and you have to protect a target which is now quite a long way away. But take note, whilst the campaign missions are better designed and have more variability in both composition and objectives, some of the routine periodic filler missions can get a bit repetitive at times, sometimes with only a slight difference in the size of the enemy force. What you make of these battles will largely depend on your playstyle. You might see them as a fantastic opportunity to hone your skills or level your ships, or you might just find them a bit boring. There is lots of shit in this game you have to figure out yourself, learn from reading the manual, or from spending time on the wiki. This is a game that anyone can play badly, but to play it well requires a bit of homework. And yes, I said that right. This game comes with an actual manual that you can access from the launcher. It is nicely done and worth reading. Seriously, read the fucking manual. This is one of the rare occasions where someone took the time to write one for you, so it's only polite to spend a few minutes reading it. Besides, it's got some incredibly useful tips. I think your status as a Battlestar Galactica fan will factor into your enjoyment of the game. I don't think there's any denying that. I'm not saying you have to be one, I'm merely noting that if you are one, you will get an added layer of meaning and appreciation from the game. The attachments, characters and experiences you've had in the TV series will map onto your battle encounters. You will literally find yourself doing things that you saw happen in battles in the TV show, and feel the satisfaction of finally understanding that a specific tactic or manoeuvre actually meant something. On some occasions, you will find yourself making huge tactical gambles, because the status quo of the battle will ultimately result in you losing. Sometimes you will have to bite the bullet and send some units to their possible or probable annihilation, because you want to save your favourite ship, that you named after your pet hamster, or that porn star you like, and you are simply not prepared to see it disintegrate into the vacuum of space. And when all this is finally resolved and the battle is over, you get to hit the replay button, sit back with your pint of vodka and watch the previous battle played out for you on screen like a damn cutscene from the TV show, with glorious shaky cam and exhilarating battle music with those majestic pipes. And yeah, any fan of the 2004 Battlestar Galactica reboot will be all too familiar with the superb soundtrack of Bear McCreary and Richard Gibbs, with the Scottish small pipes and Irish flutes. Sadly, the game does not use the same soundtrack, and whilst it's not on par with the OST from the show, it's certainly a good enough approximation to sell the atmosphere to me at least. And for the record, it breaks my fucking cold black heart that I only just became aware of this, courtesy of the Steam user Ludeman. Yeah, Bear McCreary and the Battlestar Galactica Orchestra did a live concert, and I missed it. Fuck. If you like the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, spaceship-based combat, fairly dry strategy games, and watching shit blow up in the vacuum of space, this game is pure win. And on the higher difficulty levels, some of the battles take on the form of complex three-dimensional space puzzles. This game reminds me of why after all these years I still have Command & Conquer 3 Kane's Wrath installed on my PC. There is something about a pure, well thought through strategy game that makes it eternal. Sure, Battlestar Galactica has not got $2 million cinematic cutscenes, it's not quite as gut wrenching as Homeworld, and it's a bit impenetrable at first. But after forcing myself to play this game for a good few hours straight, I got hooked. Really hooked. and ended up buying all the DLC, and still now I play 1 or 2 quick battles on most days. You need to know what you're getting yourself into with Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. Whilst it delivers some interesting lore, basic story, and a bit of historic filler information for die-hard BSG fanatics, this is not what I would consider a heavily storied space adventure game. The story is the thread that the battles hang off. The structure of the game is based more around the process of being presented with increasingly difficult and progressively more complex logic puzzles. And these logic puzzles take the form of giant fucking space battles. Ergo, engagements with the Cylons. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock has elements from a lot of games. It has excellent turn-based combat, resource management, strategy, a story. It's a little bit XCOM, a little bit Command & Conquer, and a little bit Homeworld, and all BSG action. At the time of posting this video, it is still on discount in the Steam Summer Sale. Literally, for a few more hours. But if you miss it, I'm sure it will be on sale again. This game might not be to everyone's taste, and maybe I'm viewing it through the rose-tinted glasses of being a die-hard Battlestar Galactica fan. But nevertheless, I strongly recommend this game. But for now, good luck, and happy hunting. Or should I say, good hunting.